This video is a message to the President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, and any other interested parties. And it is on the international and historical relationship between Greenland and Denmark. The Kingdom of Denmark consists in addition to Denmark also of the Faroe Islands and Greenland. In this video I'll focus on the relationship between Denmark and Greenland. Many Americans are surprised that Greenland is a legitimate part of the Danish kingdom. And you, Mr. President Donald Trump, do not seem to understand it at all, which must be due to bad advice, since I do not question your intelligence, or you are speaking against your better judgment. I'll refrain from mentioning what I call it. Greenland belongs to Denmark for historical reasons, which is almost always the case with territorial areas that belongs to a state. First of all, I must explain the expression Greenland belongs to Denmark. Of course, Greenland is not a sort of real estate, but a land and a people. We have an international principle of the right of peoples to self-determination. It has its roots back to the American Declaration of Independence and was strongly asserted by your predecessor in office, President Wilson, in the peace negotiations after World War I. So we assume that it is also your and the freedom-loving United States position today. It should be mentioned in this connection that Denmark naturally recognizes the principle in relation to Greenland. Read Section 21 of the Self-Government Act, which was passed in 2009. The law recognizes that Greenlanders are an independent people with their own culture and language. But the fact that Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark is a fact of international law, and it goes back a very long time, to be exact to 1397. It is 645 years, more than twice as long as the United States has existed. In 985, the Viking Erik the Red and his crew came from Iceland to Greenland and settled in the area around the capital Nuuk in two settlements, Vesterbygden and Østerbygden, in English, Western Town and Eastern Town. It is important to note that when the Vikings arrived, the area was uninhabited. No people lived there, not even Inuits. They were perhaps present far north in Thule, and they only slowly pushed south and only met the Norsemen in 1450, when both peoples discovered that they were not alone. Erik the Red's son, Leif the Lucky, in fact discovered America around the year 1000 and was thus the first European to set his foot on the American continent. In the same year, the year 1000, the Vikings adopted Christianity. When the Vikings were the most numerous, it is estimated that they were around 3,000 people. There was even a bishop at one point, and we can still see the many ruins of churches, farms and other buildings, ruins that are now managed and preserved as ancient monuments. With the Viking settlement, Greenland became part of Iceland, which in turn became part of Norway, and in 1397, Norway entered into a union with Denmark and Sweden, the Kalmar Treaty, and from that year Norway and thus Greenland was governed by the Danish king or the Danish government from Copenhagen. In the period 1492 to 1721, there was only limited contact with Greenland. But in 1605 and 1606, King Christian IV sent 2 English-hired expeditions to Greenland with Danish participants, and in 1619-20 an expedition with the Danish captain Jens Munk was sent to Greenland. In 1721, the Danish government sent the Norwegian priest Hans Egede to Greenland together with his wife Gertrud and his 2 sons Niels and Paul, and a number of others. Hans Greenland's task was to run a Christian mission in Greenland. He is thus the apostle of Greenland. Hans Egede's 2 sons played with the Inuit children and quickly learned Greenlandic. He landed in the same place as the Vikings, at present-day Nuuk, which thus became the first so-called Danish colony. Hans Egede founded the first Greenlandic seminary to train Greenlandic priests, and wrote several catechisms and translated parts of the Bible into Greenlandish, just as he taught the first Greenlanders to read and write. He is thus the father of the Greenlandic written language. His son Niels, in particular, continued his father's work, and the descendants of the Egede family still can be found in Greenland. Therefore, the Inuit people in Greenland, unlike in Alaska and Canada, have preserved their language and culture. Incidentally, illiteracy was already in strong decline early on, and in 1861, Greenland's first newspaper, and I hope I pronounce it correct, Attugaluit, and that means distributed reading material, was published, which was sent free of charge to all the towns on the west coast. A large part of the population could read at this time, and many of the articles and debates were written in Greenlandic, both by and about Greenland and Greenlanders. This newspaper exists to this day as a part of the Greenlandic media group Sermitsiaq. Since 1721, there has been a permanent Danish presence in Greenland, where more and more towns and settlements were gradually established, where Greenlanders increasingly settled. After the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1814, Denmark had to cede Norway to Sweden, but Greenland and the Faroe Islands remained in the Danish kingdom according to the peace negotiation in Vienna. As early as 1921, Greenlandic elected national councils had been established, which were adversary in relation to the Danish administration of Greenland. These national councils replaced the very first democratic initiatives in Greenland, namely the so-called trustyships for each settlement, which was established in 1857. Greenland's affiliation with the Danish kingdom has only been contested twice, apart from the current claim by USA and you, Mr. President Donald Trump. The first time was by the United States in the early 1900s, among other things, because the American polar explorer Peary had traveled around North Greenland. In connection with the sale of the Virgin Islands to the United States, Denmark received a declaration from the United States government in 1916, signed by the Secretary of State Robert Lansing, in which the United States recognizes Denmark's right to all of Greenland. And I'll read the whole text. In proceeding this day to the signature of the convention respecting the cession of the Danish West Indian Islands to the United States of America, the undersigned Secretary of State of the United States of America, duly authorized by his government, has the honor to declare that the government of the United States of America will not object to the Danish government extending their political and economical interest to the whole of Greenland. signed by Robert Lansing and dated New York, August the 4th, 1916. In the text of this video, there is a link to a copy of the original document. So the question is not whether the United States recognizes that Greenland is a part of the Danish kingdom. The question is only whether the United States will keep its promise or whether it will blow it. The outcome will determine what kind of nation the United States is, whether it falls into the category of countries that can be trusted to honor their guarantees, or whether the United States belong to the category of countries that put power above law. And the second time the Danish kingdom's right was challenged was by Norway in 1931 to 32, when Norwegian trappers settled in East Greenland and declared it Norwegian territory with the argument that it was empty land. The International Court of Justice in The Hague decided this dispute in Denmark's favor. So both attempts to question Denmark's legitimate rights has fallen. In the period 1944 to 1945, the Danish ambassador in Washington, Henrik Kaufmann, gave the United States the right to use Greenland for military purposes and the extraction of cryolite for aluminium production, in exchange for keeping the population supplied with necessary goods, since the connection to Denmark had been interrupted due to the German occupation of Denmark. The highest Danish official, Eske Brun, handled the task of the Danish state in Greenland during the war in cooperation with the Greenlandic elected national councils. In addition, he was involved, together with local Greenlanders and Americans, in destroying the Nazi German weather stations on the east coast. In 1953, Denmark adopted a new constitution, which also included Greenland, which thus went from colonial status to be a part of Denmark. Then in 1979, the so-called Home Rule Act was adopted, and later in 2009, the Greenlandic Self-Government Act, where it was established that the Greenlandic people are a people according to international law with the right to self-determination. The law grants autonomy to a wide range of internal matters and the possibility for the Greenlandic self-government to take home a number of additional powers if desired. Just as a so-called block grant is given in money from Denmark to Greenland, which covers a large part of the public expenses. And in section 21, as mentioned, of this law, it is stated that the decision on Greenland's independence is made by the Greenlandic people. When Greenland is thus still a part of the Danish kingdom, it is not because the Greenlanders are forced to be. They simply have not yet taken up the offer of independence. The situation is therefore such that Greenland itself has control over many matters except for those that are still handled by Denmark. These include police and judiciary things. The Danish Supreme Court is also Greenland's highest court, and the currency, Danish banknotes, are used in Greenland. In addition, foreign policy and defense. Finally, there is a common constitution, which means, among other things, that there are two Greenlandic members of the Danish parliament, the Folketing, and citizenship and passport are common. This means that Danes who travel to Greenland and Greenlanders who travel to Denmark enjoy all rights in exactly the same way. You are therefore entitled to social benefits, free education and free treatment in hospitals, which many Greenlanders benefit from, for example, when they take their higher education or are treated at the Danish National Hospital. In short, in international law, Greenland is not an independent country, but almost all local decisions are delegated to self-government. And in our time, we Danes refer to Greenland as a country with its own language, culture, and so on. Finally, it must be stated that since 1941, the United States has had access to participate in the defense of Greenland, most recently confirmed in the Defense Agreement of 1951. The US itself has scaled this contribution down from around 10,000 soldiers in 1951 to 150 today. That is approximately 1.5% of the largest contribution. So the United States have also neglected Greenland's defense and can, without taking over a country, increase its contribution to security. Incidentally, Denmark has, by comparison, recently increased its defense contribution by a double-digit billion amount in Danish crowns. All this is for your information, Mr. President of the United States, Donald Trump. Yours sincerely, Thorkil Sohn, Bildtsvej 26, Ringkøbing in Denmark. I am an ordinary Dane who knows about the history. I have a degree in law from a Danish university and are a former headmaster of a private boarding school for teenagers. And at last, Mr. President Donald Trump, I'll apologize for my poor English. It is not my native language, but I trust that you can understand it. Thank you if you have listened. Thank you.